Welcome to LHC Unplugged. I'm Sarah Harrington. I'm the Director of Communications here at LongHillChapel, and I have our lead pastor, Michael Hoddy, and our associate pastor, Joey Monteleone. Hello, guys.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
So happy to all three of us are back together again.
I'm excited. We're back.
It's the best this way.
It is. So you were talking a little bit coming in, Pastor Joey, about driving tests.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit of background
Age
here.
17, I had to take it, and I failed the first time. Not because of what I thought I would fail. I nailed parallel parking. I got right in. I was able to back up and everything. I was doing great with my turn signals. And I literally get to the end of the test, and I'm certain I've passed. And there's this small little hill, and the guy says, pull over to the side. And so I did, and he said, throw the parking brake on. I didn't know where it was. And I said that. I said, I don't know where this is. He said, okay, keep driving. And I was like, whew, dodged that bullet. I pull over to the side, and he goes, so you failed because you didn't know where the parking brake is. Come back in a month when you know where the parking brake is.
So my question is, whenever you get into any vehicle now, do you immediately locate the parking
I
brake?
never use it. I really don't. I haven't learned the lesson clearly. I know where it is in my vehicle, but no, it's not the thing that has traumatized me so much.
Has your vehicle ever rolled down a hill?
No.
Unattended?
No, and you know what? As you talk about this, it's kind of like whenever I see someone put their parking brake on and I don't think they need to, I silently judge them like, whoa, where do you think the car is going?
Well, you're kind of working some stuff out there,
I
it sounds
am,
like.
but that's why I failed.
When you were taking the test, were you using their car?
It was my car.
So it was your own car?
Oh, there's absolutely no reason I shouldn't have known where that was.
Okay.
I just never used it.
So Pastor Joey doesn't know where basic controls are in motor vehicles.
At least in that story, yep.
Yeah.
Wait, so go back to the parking brake. I use it religiously.
I'm usually on flat surfaces where I don't think additional parking brake control is necessary. Am I wildly wrong with this?
No, you're not.
Okay.
I think I'm the crazy one in that. But I always throw it on, and I don't know if that's like the mom thing where it's like,
I'll do it on a hill.
Protect as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I do it on a hill. But there are people who park and they just throw it on out of instinct. I'm not that person.
Are you, Pastor Michael?
No, I'm not. But it's the same thing. It's on the hill. I mean, your car's not going to go anywhere on a flat surface.
That's kind of
Where's
my
it going
thing,
to go?
too.
If someone wants to push your car somewhere, well, that's a whole different. You have a whole different thing going on at that point.
I love that for them, but that's not for me.
You need more than a parking brake if you have someone trying to push your car.
It's a bigger issue at that point, and probably the parking brake isn't going to stop that from happening.
That's right.
But on this podcast, I'm not the only host who failed their parking test.
I have your parking test.
See, I'm still working it out.
Yeah, you
My
are.
driving test.
Yes, I also failed my driving test, and it was sort of a similar story that, I'm still a very good parallel parker. I think dads in general that's a dad pride issue.
It's a badge of honor, yeah.
Yeah, I will parallel park the car. I'm the one who does that in our family. But it's different than it is in New Jersey, where they kind of have this closed course at the motor vehicles. We would do it out on public roads. Wow. My town wasn't that big, and the start of the course was literally like I could see it from my house. And so roads that were pretty familiar and all that. And I did all the things and parallel parked and all that. And there was this one road over literally by where I went to Catholic school, and it was a one-way street. And I went over there, and this was not a wide street, so you kind of just turn onto the one-way street. I failed because I didn't turn into the left lane on the one-way. There are no marked lanes on this street, but I didn't turn into the left side of the street. And I'm a little bit of an extreme personality because I went home and I'm like, I'm a failure. I'm never going to be able to drive. It's over.
I will never drive again.
Yes, and that was the end. But I went back and I passed. But it was for a technical. I'm still kind of upset about that. It was a technicality.
It's the technicality.
I felt like entrapped by that.
To be fair, they want to know that you're safe. They want to know that you know what you're doing.
It's a one-way. If you turn the wrong way onto a one-way street, okay,
different.
Yes, fail me. But I did not. No one else was coming. No one was coming from. I don't know if I'm as much traumatized by parking brakes or anything like that, but I still have feelings after all these years.
I'm not bitter, but...
So yours was on a course, Pastor Joey? Okay.
Yeah.
And Pastor Michael, yours was on like the road, the actual public road. Because that's how mine was too.
Yours was the public road?
So the course is interesting.
Yeah, New Jersey has a course.
Okay.
Or at least they did when I took it.
No, I think they still do.
Yeah, you have to go to the DMV, and it's like this closed little course.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So yours was open road.
Open road.
What did you fail for?
Did you fail?
No.
Oh, wow.
I passed. And what was scary for me was I was one of the youngest people in my grade. So I knew I have to pass this because I'm literally the last one to take the test. But I did get 1 point off because I moved too slowly into the other lane when I put on my blinker. Probably because my parking brake was still on since I'm obsessed with it.
Okay.
But yes, that was my 1 point off.
So you didn't come swerving rapidly into the lane next to you. You weren't just like yank the wheel over.
No, I was very cautious. I was looking all my mirrors. I was like, I'm doing great. And that was the point I got off. So
you know what you do though, like in a metaphorical sense, regardless of how far afield Pastor Joey and I get, you yank the wheel over into the lane where it needs to go, so we actually talk about the thing that we're supposed to talk about. So,
and you did it today. Look at you getting us into
go
our
yank
topic.
it over.
Well, mine was going to be, and sometimes we idolize certain things, maybe like a car. So we're talking.
You're working hard on that one, I think, just a little bit.
Or a cow.
Now you need to contextualize that.
Okay, so we're just going to jump right in.
Let's dive in. We are still in our series, Becoming the People, and we're traveling along with these wandering, struggling children of Israel in the wilderness. And they're in the wilderness because they have been freed from Egyptian slavery. And there's a little bit of disbelief going on. And so the consequence of that disbelief is that they have to wander through the wilderness for 40 years. And when we pick up with them in chapter 32, Moses has been given the 10 commandments, but they haven't been on a stone tablet yet. We kind of remember from the film version of the 10 Commandments that these commandments are on pillars of stone, but that wasn't how they were originally given. First, they were spoken. And when they were spoken, they were given to Moses, who then gave them to the people. And then all of a sudden, the glory of God shows up. And the people are freaked out. And they say to Moses, look, don't let us near this. We're terrified. You talk to God, and then you talk to us. We can't get near. We're petrified. And Moses says, okay, that'll be our relationship. And then all of a sudden he goes up on Mount Sinai to get those commandments on pillars. The cloud comes down and Moses disappears. Not for 40 seconds, not for 40 minutes, for 40 days. And you kind of have to feel that for a second. Like, you got redeemed and delivered out of this slavery, which was your inheritance. You kind of always thought this is always going to be the way life is. And this God shows up and delivers you miraculously. You're kind of wandering around and you're getting fed this manna and what else? Quail. And it's a weird time to kind of be alive, to just kind of exist. But you're also terrified. You're also afraid of what's going on.
Well, there's so much uncertainty.
So much.
We've talked about it in some of the weeks where you're going from uncertainty to uncertainty to, is there going to be provision today? Is there going to be provision today? And one of the constants in that was their leader, was Moses. Mm-hmm. And now suddenly he's disappeared and there's a cloud and they don't know if he's gone, or if he's what's happened.
Yeah. So in the top of the chapter, they come to Aaron, Moses' brother, and they say, Moses is gone. We don't know what happened to him. So make for us a God that will deliver us, that will lead us. And what's interesting is that Aaron says, okay. He says, give me your earrings on your wives, your children, your sons and daughters. Bring them to me. And it says he melted them down and he formed a cast of a golden calf, a cow. And one of the things you just said before we started was, outside of biblical context, this is the weirdest story ever.
I mean, it's very interesting if you just hear all of a sudden they made a golden calf and it's like, why?
It's like, cool.
Why a golden calf?
Yeah, and you can use your sanctified imagination of like, what did this look like? How big was it? Its earrings and all of that. Regardless of what it was, what's most interesting is that they engage in this kind of church word, the spiritual word called idolatry. They replace God with something else. And a lot of us hear that and we kind of think, well, that's a pagan thing. That's something that, people outside of a relationship with God engage with. And maybe that's some, Western religions and all of that stuff. We don't have that. We certainly don't have that in America. We don't engage in idolatry. But if the point of idolatry, which we have to define, is replacing God with other things, it's looking to other things to give what only God can provide, whether that's security, provision, identity, hope, all of these things that we look to God for and that we rightly should, we now position them onto something else. And that's really what these people are doing in this story. They're really looking and saying, I feel a way. Uncertainty has literally become my life. I don't know what happened to our leader. I'm terrified of that big cloud thing. So why don't you just make me a God so that I'll feel a little bit better? And I have to believe their assumption was that Moses will come back, but they don't know when, and they don't know how long. And that's really what's underneath idolatry, particularly in this story, but particularly for us, is that idolatry is always fueled by impatience.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's a cow because, like you said, it seems like a pretty ridiculous. I love the ridiculous picture of
Yes.
it, not the idolatry, but the ridiculous picture of this. And I think there's something symbolic to us where we would say, well, that's silly. Why did they do that? Why did they trade the God who parted the seas and provided manna and quail and sustained them in the wilderness and water came from the rock and just thing after thing after thing? And you're like, yeah, he's not around, but we've got this cow. This cow is going to be awesome. And it just seems ridiculous, but it also, I think, points to the fact that a lot of the things that we look to for security, to look to, as small g gods, even in our time, are equally ridiculous. They're invented things. They're ridiculous things.
Yeah, and Sarah, you asked before, like, is there a reason it's a cow? There is. In that time and in that culture, calf or a cow or a bull was a symbol of fertility, of power, of divine authority, and of strength. And when you understand, like, hey, that's what they were going after, it wasn't just some random farm animal. Like, no, they were literally looking to say, we feel this way, and this is what we need. This is what we think we don't have, so let's construct the thing to meet the gap. That's why the calf.
The cow of power.
The power cow, yeah. And again, it sounds ridiculous, but when you understand what's going on underneath it, and when you understand the tendency towards it, you go, yeah, I got a version of that.
So as you guys were talking, it made me think, the Israelites are a very faithful people. So they have this faith in God. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it shifts pretty quickly. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's if you know the story and if you've kind of followed the narrative in the book of Exodus, it seems like these people are always complaining. It seems like they're always falling short. They're always, whining about where's the food, where's the water, and complaining. And that's true. But I think we need to humanize them as well and just look at the fact that they've taken big step of faith, big step into uncertainty, and they do it over and over again. Mm-hmm. And what's really the truth about human nature, and it's the truth about us, is we can usually do that a couple times. We can take the big step, and most of us at some point in our lives we have. But when it's big step to big step, when it's not, okay, we took the step and now things are fine. Now we see where God is. It's step to step. It's uncertainty to uncertainty. It's waking up every day and having a new problem to solve. It's following this leader through difficult circumstances. And now in the case of this story about the golden calf, seeing that leader disappear. And so in a sense, it's like, okay, we've come all the way out here. We've done this thing. And now the one who was leading us is not only gone, he's been gone for a long time. And we don't know if he's coming back. We don't know what's going on up there. And it tells us something we don't expect to see in a story like this and maybe in our own lives. I think if you're a Christian, if you're a Jesus follower or a person of faith, it's easy to think, well, the idolatry is the stuff I'm going to struggle with early in the journey. It's the stuff where I've taken the big step and there's going to be this other thing that beckons for my affection or my attention or my heart. And that is actually true. But it's a lot easier when we have the momentum of faith on our side to avoid those things and to follow God into the uncertainty. But when it's time after time after time after time and your strength has just been worn down and your heart has been drained of stamina and perseverance, it's actually there that I think the idols of our time beckon us the most strongly. It's when we haven't gotten what we want, when we haven't seen the end, when we haven't seen the resolution, there's these things that come onto the horizon that suddenly might never have looked appealing, but now they do because we're not getting what we want and we're just so tired. We just want certainty. We want to be able to cling on to something. We don't want to go from step of faith to step of faith. And that's what we don't expect. We don't expect that this is something that's late in the journey. We think it's early, but we never think that it's late. And I actually think one of the things the story tells us is that it is.
Yeah, it comes at a really vulnerable point for these people. They're tired. You had talked about that in one of the sermons, just how exhausted they are. And Moses is exhausted as well. That's kind of where the rock strike comes. What's interesting, too, I kind of see this in there, is that they don't say, we don't believe in God anymore. Mm-hmm. They don't say, we have no faith. They don't mention any of that. They ask Aaron to make a god for them, embodying all of these virtues, because that's kind of what they're lacking right now, but they still worship it on an altar. They still call it God. And in fact, Aaron says, this is the God that delivered you out of Egypt. So not only is it just symbolically and physically present, they're attributing what God did for them to it. Why is that important? That's important because we do that all the time. I do that all the time. I'll give you a perfect example. It shows up in finances, where the thing that I thought, or at least I started with saying, God has given this to me, this is a symbol of his presence, his provision, and his power, has now become the thing that I look to for my security, hope, and salvation. So this good thing that actually was a manifestation of God's presence in my life has very quickly become an idol that now I look to it instead of him. Another interesting thing I asked during the time of study was like, where did they get the gold? He said, bring me your gold earrings that your sons and daughters and your wives have. Where'd they get that? They were slaves. They didn't have gold. In Exodus 12, as they're leaving, they were given gold as kind of this parting gift, but it says as a sign of the Lord's favor. So these good things that God gave them as a sign of his presence with them, they very quickly took and said, look, we're exhausted, we're tired, and we're insecure. We're going to take this thing that God gave us and we're actually going to turn it into a thing that gives us security. We got a version of that. And I don't even have to go down a list because I think it's so prevalent in our culture where we naturally do it. We are creatures that are designed to worship. Whether it's celebrity or God, like we are designed to do this. That's just baked into the DNA. What we then position it towards and how we focus that devotion, worship, and adoration can get really complicated at vulnerable moments in our lives.
Yeah, and I think with the worship, the thing you're talking about, if you think of those terms, you think about worship as something that you do. Like you come to church and we sing some songs, we call that worship. And I think the thing we learn about human nature is it's not a switch that you turn on and off. Yeah. It's not like you turn the worship switch on and the worship switch off. It is something we are constantly doing. And the only question is who or what in a given moment. So it's this thing it's this dynamic that we always, as just human nature, we're positioning ourselves as, and, here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and where we're all self-made people who pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps, or at least that's what the narrative tells us. We don't like to think of that. We don't like to think that there's something in our hearts that always is looking for something to be beholden to. But it's true. And the thing that's so interesting here with this story is that in the absence of that direction, in the absence of that leadership from Moses, they immediately lock onto something else. They lock onto the blessings, the good things that God gave them. I think we think of idolatry very often as like, okay, it's this crazy bad thing or this, and there's examples of that in the Bible. But the thing that makes it so subtle for us and hard for us to discern is it actually is most of the time good things. Jesus actually talks about this in the Sermon on the Mount, which was his big coming out stump speech when he came onto the scene in the Gospels. And what he does through most of it is he's setting up contrast between the way of the world and the kingdom of God. And one of the things he talks about is he points at a contrast. He says, even the pagans do this. And it's easy for us to think, well, the pagans are the people who don't believe in God. The pagans totally believed in God. They just believed in the wrong God. Mm-hmm. And so there's always this contrast between the way of Jesus, the way of the kingdom of God, and then all these other things which are right at hand, and they're looking to connect with something that we already are constantly doing.
Maybe tangential, but I heard this statistic the other day that in America, it would take you knocking on 6 doors to be able to hear about Jesus. Somebody in some fashion will be able to tell you about the person and the work of Jesus just by knocking on 6 doors. In other parts of the world, it would be 1 in 30,000 doors. Oh. Why do I bring that up? Spirituality is not lost on us. There is a world and a culture, particularly that we live in, and if you're listening to this, probably where you find yourself, where most people believe in God, believe in the idea of God, believe in a higher power, believe in a being that created things and that we are ultimately accountable and responsible to. Where this gets tricky is that when we have decided who we get to worship in addition to that God, that's when idolatry now literally comes front and center, because the thing about idolatry is you don't know what you're worshiping until it gets threatened, until you decide, okay, this is now no longer going to be the thing that I worship, the thing I give attention to, all of that. And when that happens, you very quickly realize, oh, I'm worshiping God and I'm worshiping God plus. That's, I think, the more sobering thing within this passage is not like, okay, we've turned and we're just uncomfortable and we're worshiping at the idol and the good thing that God gave us. Yes, but is there also a point where I've decided that God is not enough, therefore I'll just add to him?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where we find God at the end of this passage. He's ticked. He's angry. He's ready to blot them out of the world. He even says to Moses, hey, those people that you brought out, your people, I'm going to take care of them. Like, he's hurt. He's devastated that this relationship that he's established with them is now thrown out the window after all he's done for them.
And to kind of go back to something you were talking about, it actually just struck me as we were talking about it. The golden calf is down here at the bottom of the mountain, but the cloud is still up on the mountain and they can see the cloud.
It's right there.
And so it's not as if Moses disappears and there's nothing. Moses disappears into this uncertainty, but there had to have been this awareness of this cloud, this presence of God up there. But like you said, it wasn't an either or. It was, okay, we need to add something to our awareness that makes us feel a little better, that makes us feel a little more certain, something that we can interact with and we can conceive of. And everyone knew what a cow was, and we can behold and we can just have a really good handle on.
And it's certainly present in my life. I can easily see all the areas where I've decided God is enough, but I'll also add this too.
Yes.
So it's not something I've arrived at, but I think the awareness of it is most important. Probably the most important thing about this story is not just the tendency that we have as a worshiping creation to misalign our worship, but it's also to add things where God says, no, I have the ultimate creation. I have the ultimate position here. And I think that's literally why it's one of the commandments. You'll have no other gods before me. It's the first commandment. Why is that? Because God is a covenantal God. He's a relational God. This isn't just a cloud, so to speak, up on the top of a mountain that doesn't engage with his people. We have the ultimate engagement because of the work and the power and the presence of Jesus. But when we trade that, that has to affect God, and ultimately it affects our view of God and what he wants to accomplish in the world and in our lives. So it's not just this random thing where, hey, maybe I should get a little bit better at this. It's literally foundational to how you see everything.
Do you think in our society today, idolatry is something that is more prominent or present based off of the fact that I feel like our society is a society with a lot of distraction?
I think it's more subtle. I think in every age there's idolatry. There's things that are beckoning for our affection and for our allegiance. But I think it's become more subtle. I think we have, in some ways, we've deluded ourselves into thinking that we are more advanced and we're smarter, and that would never happen to people like us. You know, look at these silly people with their cow. We would never do that. But I think the subtlety of it, and I think also the fact that it very often is good things that have become God. That's why I think more challenging to kind of put a finger on now, because whenever you do it, you're doing it at a good thing that usually people have gotten into for a good reason. And it's just gone beyond the boundaries of being a blessing, and it's become something much more than that. I think that's the difference now. It's maybe not more, but it's harder to untangle it from the fabric of our lives.
So we've talked a lot about this. Modern day, today, what does this look like?
You know, as we've talked about, it can literally be anything good given from God that then assumes his place in our lives. It's kind of easy to say finances. It's easy to say distractions and our social media and attention and all of that. I think for us, educated modern people who would never be so duped by this thing, it comes in more subtle ways, and you have to be really honest about what good things God has given you that you've idolized over him. Personally, that can be kids. That can be family. I think those can be ministry at times. I think the thing that I do for God and others, if that replaces him in my life, those can all become idols. And what that really requires is a level of humility and honesty, which I think is what these people sort of lacked. Had they come to Aaron and said, look, we're feeling a certain way. I don't like this at all. Can you help us kind of process this disconnect we're having? That's a different conversation. When they took it to the next level of forming this thing to take their attention, affection, and their focus, that's when it kind of got out of control. We would never say that about our families, but it has the potential. We would never say that about our careers, has the potential. I think the awareness of these things is not necessarily pinpointing exactly what they can be, but does it have the potential to become those things? Only you can answer that. I also think that there's a level of community that comes in to play with this. Asking hard questions of those around you. Is this taking the place of God in my life? I have an obsessive personality. So I have people who I say, is this becoming too much in my life? Because it very easily can. This is the hard work. Like you said, Pastor Michael, this is past the moment of salvation. This is down the line of things that we don't think are going to pop up in our spiritual journey, but left unchecked, literally become the thing that we worship.
I think a thing very practically that you can do is you can kind of start to identify what some of those things are by asking the question of, when it's up, am I up? Mm-hmm. And when it's down, am I down? And not just like, okay, you and your kids get in an argument, you have a rough day. We all have those. But where their trajectory starts to define your heart and how you see the world and how you see life and how you see those other things. And it's not saying that automatically that's a God, but it's saying that there's a yellow light that should come on the moment that we see these things that actually capture our hearts a little bit. And when they're going in what we feel like is a good direction, we're on top of the world. When they don't, we're not. We're uncertain, or we're anxious, or we're afraid, or we're grieving, or even angry. And that's a good practical way to figure that out, to just kind of look at our lives and reflect that and be really honest with ourselves. Remember, we said that these are good things. Mm-hmm. The goal here is not to abandon good things. It's to bring them back in the balance. It makes all of us bristle when you say something like, where our kids can be idols, but that's actually very true. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that we should not love our kids and not devote ourselves to our children. It's really, for all of us, it's our first ministry as our families. But it's to say, has this become something more than something God has given me to steward and a blessing that I have in my life that I can be thankful for? Has it actually begun to define me and to really capture my heart?
Well, thanks so much for listening to LHC Unplugged. As a reminder, we gather on Sundays at 10:15, both in person on Shumpike Road in Chatham, New Jersey, and online at lhcnj.net. And if you have a question for our pastors to answer, please send it in to us. And you can do that by emailing it to us at questions@lhcnj.net. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you next time.